Hello, and welcome to this video where we're going to look at the next serious game, which is called On Target Goals. Now this one's a little bit different because it actually uses a practice that isn't included in this version of the product, but that's for a reason. It shows you how we can integrate practices between different elements of the product, but also how the card view can be quite useful. So this is about understanding whether the goals that we have for our product or for our team are good goals or not. And we're using the Flow Systems goal identification practice to help us work that out. So let's have a look at the game. So we've got a description of the game here, why we might do it, and then the instructions for how we play the game. Now it's a bit of a complicated board, so let me walk you through it a little bit. Now I'm not going to describe for you in this video what the goal identification practice is, what the flow system is, or how it works, because all you need to know to play this game is going to be right at your fingertips, which is part of the point of Essence, so it's a nice way to illustrate that. And what we have is 6 targets with an optional 5 more targets, because one of these 6 is actually one that breaks down into 5 more as an optional extra level of detail. And these 6 things, well, they are all what we talk about as essential goal setting steps. So when setting your goals, you should reflect on these steps, which is about specificity and difficulty, what type of goal it is, what level it sits at, is it close to the team or far away, what purpose the goal has and the role it has, and the origination of the goal, plus the 5 C's of goal setting: clarity, challenging, commitment, check-in, and whether it's complicated or complex. So each of those 6 things, the 5 things and then the 5 C's, each have a target, and each target has a description at the top of what that particular aspect is. Now before we start, we probably need to understand a little bit about goals from the goal identification practice. So over on the left hand side, we've got a little bit of theory that I'll not describe now on what goals are, what a distal and a proximal goal is, what goal structure is. And then in the flow system, we've got a little bit more detail on goals than we have, for example, in Scrum with the product goal here on the right. So we've got a goal that goes through a few more steps, a few more states, a candidate goal, detailed, understood, then committed. So compared to the product goal, for example, it goes identified and committed and then fulfilled or abandoned. This one has got a couple of extra states and some extra checklists. So I'll come to that later. And then when we describe our goal, we have a checklist for whether it's described well. So we've got a few checklists that describe our goal, and we want to be able to test it against that. So that tells us a little bit about what we're after and how do we go about doing it. Well, we've put our goals into these targets. So to show you how this works, I've got some examples here. So I've created a goal which is about using artificial intelligence to summarize customer reviews and identify trends in our system. And I've got 6 tokens, one for each of the targets. So the object of this game is to take these tokens and distribute them across the board. And then, as with most games, we want to do this in a collaborative way. So we'll want to take it in turns to work out whether we think this goal meets the target criteria well or not well. If we think it meets it really well, we'll put it bang in the middle. If we think it doesn't meet it well, we'll put it to the outside. Now, if we're playing this game with several goals, then we can either keep them all the same color. We might actually want to change these to different colors. So if I've got, goal 2 is mostly in the middle and goal 1 is mostly in the outside, then we can tell the difference in quality. And when we come to look at each target, there's a card at the top that describes in basic terms what the target is about. So for this one, specificity and difficulty. Is the goal specific enough for others to know what's expected? And does it provide some level of difficulty while not being too difficult? So for this one, if we as a team understand what it means, then we can say maybe that sits somewhere like here. And we might be quite happy with that. So what we do is over the course of the game, we go through each of these 6 areas and we place our goal somewhere that we're comfortable with. And then we can step back and have a look at it. And if we want to go into more detail with the 5 C's, we've got again the same kind of thing. What do we mean by check-in? well, this card describes what we mean by check-in. And when we have our goal, do we want to place that in the middle of the target or to the outside? So to play that part, I would just duplicate these tokens another 5 times. Now, this is a nice simple way to do it, and it's really about getting you to think about whether the goals you have are good goals from these 6 plus 5 different perspectives. And that makes us think in different ways, and we can do a bit of brainstorming, and we can discuss that amongst the team. We want to make it collaborative as usual. There is another way that we can really dig into the tool a little bit more with this. So, as I say, this has a goal as cards. Now, if you have the goal identification practice in your team room, then obviously you can create instances of that goal. But even with the product goal as Scrum, that's still a goal, and that's a good goal we might want to play this game with. So what we can do is we can create an instance of our product goal. So let's take the second one. I copy that, and I create an instance. So I go to instance here, and I give that a name. Well, let's actually summarize it. So interactive AI advice. So I can add that in. Now what I've got is an instance of this product goal that has the ability to put extra notes and to-dos, and I can set the state. So I can start ticking boxes in this one. And I can put a little note here that puts a bit more information in my goal. Now what that lets me do is instead of just using tokens and post-it notes, I can start using this, and I can be a bit clever as well. Let me show you an example. So I've got that first example where we have our AI summarization. If I click on this, I've got a note that describes my goal in relatively brief terms, and when I come to do my on target stuff, I can just drag that straight onto the board. Now what's nice here is I click here, and I've got the notes here to remind me, so I can look at this and say, is this a performance or learning goal? And I can read this. I don't need to remember it in my head, and I can decide if it is or not. But it also lets me do an extra check, because if I come back down to here, I've got this description of my goal. Well, if I look at my Scrum product goal, and in the identified state, I've got an extra state that I've added, because I can add checklist items. Now these items only live within the team room, so there's a little warning here, but I added a checklist item here so that it would remind me to go and look at some other things. So for example, to get to identified, I not only need to describe the future state of the product, which it does, it describes that well. The product goal is in the backlog, well let's assume that it is, but it also says the goal checklists to detailed are complete. So I've got to look at these things too. Is the name unique? Yes. Do I know the wider stakeholders? Well, maybe it's a little bit vague. I could probably update that a little bit in this notes page if I wanted to, or maybe take a note. So probably I can't tick that yet. So I can start to compare my goal with these things, and I've added some specific checklists here. So I've got this one. And then again here, I might want to meet the goal description to bit further, this committed state, and I might want to make sure that it meets these things as well. So even if I haven't got all the practices in my instance of TeamSpace, I can still look at external things, and I can make local changes to the Scrum practices to make sure I cover these things. So in this one, I would say, does my team know how they measure it? Yes, they do, because there was measures in there. Are they discussing it? Have they committed to it? Have these, is my goal description meeting these things? Well, it describes the outcome. I would say, yes, that's all true. So that's briefly described. And then have we got all these to committed? Well, let's imagine that we have. So it means I've got these extra checks before I can get this committed to be fully achieved. That's a bit more advanced, that one. You don't need to do that in order to get value from this this game, but it does show you that actually using the tool to capture some details about your goals can be really useful. It makes it a bit easier to move things around the board. You're not dealing with post-it notes and the real estate on that, because you've got a bit more space to describe what's going on. You can track things that you spot during the exercise as to-dos against this goal. So you've got everything in the one place so you can start to prioritize what you do. So that's the on-target goals game. A bit more advanced than some of the others, but when you step back and look at it, it's really quite simple. You've basically got 6 things that are good tests of a goal, and you're considering them one at a time and putting them on the target, stepping back, having a look at the overall picture, and then deciding whether or not it looks like you've got a goal that is satisfactory, or whether it gives you some ideas of things you want to improve, extra details you want to put in, or extra people you need to get involved in your goal definition.